Fran has been my boss several times in my career. He's been my mentor, my friend for an extended period of time. The first time we worked together was with AT&T. He was an executive director. I was the lead on the technology on a project called BAP. We were trying to replace all equipment, both network equipment and computers, in every office we had in the United States. It was about a several $100 million kind of project. It was the first time that I had interacted with Fran. And one of the things that was interesting is that he kept asking me about my resume. And was I enhancing my resume? Was I doing things to add things to my resume? Which is, no other boss has ever asked me to do that. And I was wondering, well, if I enhance my resume, I can leave, right? Now in his book, and what he'll talk about in a few minutes, it's part of his technique, right? He gives you the ability to leave, but you don't want to leave because the work is so good and you're working for somebody that you like to work for. Also for the students in my class, not to embarrass them too much, but when I talk about a manager that you want to have, I'm talking about Fran. Now, if you're in a transformational situation, which this was, we were changing all the technology in the company, you're going to break some glass. Meanwhile, you're going to tick some people off. If you don't have somebody flying cover for you, you're going to be in trouble. Now, every time people would go run around my back to go talk to him, he would make sure that everything was okay. He'd explain what we're doing, why we're doing it, and pretty much make that go away. Also, if I needed more budget or more people, he always gave you the resources that you needed in order to be successful. So those combination of things are things that were important to me. The second time I worked for him, he was the CIO on Wall Street. He was there for a little while. He asked me to join him. And I grew up in New York, so I knew New York, but I'd lived in New Jersey for a long time. I really didn't want to go back into the city. I also was pretty well positioned at AT&T. I didn't want to leave, but he has a way of making you do things you don't want to do and pushing you out of your comfort zone and things you either don't want to do or you don't think you can do. So I was glad I went because it was a great experience. We not only transformed a company, we transformed the whole industry because we were the first ones to digitize the work feeds going into the trader's workstation. We were the first ones to use Sun products, put Sun on the map. And from that, every other company spent about a year and a half to try to catch up. The next time I worked for him, he was a CEO of a network company. Now, I had my own company at that time, so he asked me to do a little consulting for him, which I did. So one night I get a call from him, and he was trying to go and do business with Kodak or possibly Xerox. And they were both in Rochester. So he wanted me to go work and watch Rochester. But number one, I didn't work for him. Number two, I'm thinking, Rochester? So by this time, we had been friends long enough that he knew my wife. So I gave the phone to my wife. And he talked to her for about 10 minutes. And then she hung up. Needless to say, we didn't go to Rochester. So he has a mystical power on some people, but apparently my wife's not one of them. Also, I think the conversation ended when she said, to die in Rochester is redundant. So that pretty much ended that conversation. The next time I worked for him, I was a consultant. He was at Bell South. He was the CIO at Bell South. And this is where all the things he had done previously all came together. If you look at the list of accolades in terms of CIO of the Year, a Technology Organization of the Year, Best Place to Work, all those things came together in great glory. Some of the things that he did down there, if you look, for those of you that are in my IT strategy course, when I talk about alignment, partnership, competitive advantage, Fran was doing that long before people thought that was a good thing to do. In fact, if he had written a book then, he would have saved a lot of people a lot of time trying to dream it up on their own. Most recently, he's been on a series of boards, both public and private. He's the chairman of the board of a visualization company. And of course, he's still winning awards. Last year, he won a Lifetime Achievement Award in the technology. So, my friend, Fran Dramis.
I'm here because people like Mike and Jeff Nickerson, who's also as part of this institution, I had the luxury of having those type of people work for me. And they made me look a lot smarter than I ever could be. And I owe so much to people like Mike and people like Jeff who happened to touch my life at part of my career. I wanted to share with you, I've been asked to talk about leadership. And so that's what we're going to do. I have had the opportunity to write about leadership in a couple of ways. I have 3 books. Oh, good, thank you. Yay. I've written 3 books on leadership. This one is called the CIO Handbook, and it's for people who want to lead technology organizations. And the subscript of this is how to avoid having CIO, meaning career is over. And so it's an interesting handbook on leading technology organizations, because you have to be a certain type of person to lead a technology organization. And the one thing you can't be is the smartest person, because you'll never be the smartest person in leading a technology organization. The second book is a book on individual leadership. It's called Creating an Intentional Business Life. I'm coming to you from Mars, you can hear it. And this book is around all of us taking responsibility, personal responsibility of creating our own career plan. Because in this world, no company is going to give you a career plan. We'll talk about the fact that the concept of job security went away in the 1980s. You probably don't even, at your age and at where you are, you understand that you'll probably work for about 8 different companies in your career. And so that book is to tell you kind of how to orchestrate that for yourself. This book, which is The 4 Secrets of Retention, is what we're going to talk about. Because the ultimate test of a leader is, do people want to work for that person? And if all of you who are current leaders or who want to become leaders of various types of organizations, you're going to be faced with, how do I get people's attention in the 3-year period of time that they're going to be working for me? Because they're only going to be there for 3 years. That's it. In my profession, the average length of time of a chief information officer is 5 years. The average length of time of somebody working for a CIO is 2.8 years. So they almost got to the 3-year period of time. So the challenge is on leadership is, how do I get really people's attention while they're working for me? And how do I keep them to work for me? So this presentation is based on the luck that I've had in leading organizations that are listed on the board there. The ultimate test of kind of leadership is, does it work in various organizations? And I've had the luck of having the opportunity of leading technology organizations, each of those. When I put this up in other presentations, people say, well, yeah, I understand that you can't hold a job, and that's why you work for so many people like that. But I kind of think I was all right. Nobody kicked me out. What I want to talk about a little bit today is the concept that I mentioned earlier, which is, if you're going to have people only working for you for a short period of time, retention has a different meaning. It really means attention now. How do you create the ability to create a mind share for people who are working for you for 3 years? And what are the techniques to do that? So if you allow me, I'm going to use the word retention and attention together. So I have a little bit of, if you allow me, a little bit of language flexibility now as I present to you. And every time I give this presentation, I put this picture up, because languages had a certain meaning to me this summer. My friend, let's call him Bill, because that's his name, called me and said, I'm going to visit France, and I don't know the language. And I'm going to visit all the cathedrals in France. I'm going to take pictures and that type of stuff. And not only do I not speak French, but most of the cathedrals are Catholic cathedrals, and I'm not, and he wasn't Catholic, and I was his resident Catholic friend. So he said to me, you Catholics, when a ceremony starts, you stand up, you kneel down, you sit down, you stand up. I don't know what to do. What happens if I'm in there taking pictures and a ceremony starts? And I said, Bill, look, it's really easy. Just jump into a pew and do what the person next to you does, and then you'll be fine. So as luck would have it, he's in Notre Dame, and he's in the front, he's taking pictures of the altar, and a ceremony starts on the side. So he jumps into the first pew next to the person. And they're sitting down, and the guy stands up, and he stands up. And the entire, this is what he told me, the entire church starts pointing at him, and he freaks out, and he runs to the back of the church, and he gets an usher, and he says, "Why are people pointing at me?" And he said, "Sir, the ceremony that you can't understand in the front is a baptism, and the priest just asked, will the father of the baby please stand up?" So I want to put this up because language means something, and I want to switch languages on you in a bunch of different times. My journey as a leader, as an executive, started in several dozen years ago. And I put this slide up because at the same time that I was named as Vice President of Technology for one of the divisions of AT&T, I happened to attend the retirement ceremony for my then father-in-law. And it was a typical retirement ceremony of a passage of an age. He actually got a gold watch. He actually was there for 40 years in one company. ExxonMobil was the company. And as I was looking at that, having read all of the newspapers, I was thinking, you know what? There's downsizing happening all throughout, this is in the 1980s, downsizing happening all throughout America. What I'm looking at is the last gold watch that I'll ever see. The world is changing. This concept of a social contract, when I first joined AT&T, you will not believe this. I'm sure you'll not believe this. But they said that they had not laid off any, I joined them in the 70s. They said, I know I don't look that old, they said at that time that they had never laid off anyone in their history of 100 years. Now, as I tell that to people now, they look at me and they go, "Oh, come on." They hadn't. We in America owned the marketplace. I mean, think about this. I mean, your professors are a lot better at this than I am. Think about what happened after World War II. What market was there? We had the market. Germany was destroyed. Japan was destroyed. China was contemplating their naval. I mean, they were internally focused. No one in the world had any sort of capacity. We owned the marketplace. We built products. At our own level, we built the products, and we offered to the world what the products were and what the price we determined, which was really based on our cost, not any sort of competitive thing. And we had that from the 50s all the way on, and some would say even before that. And so we created this kind of bloated middle infrastructure of companies, which in the 80s had to be destroyed. And people who joined companies thinking they would stay with those companies for their entire career. Their entire career. Now, what I would ask you, if you're going to join a company right now, do you think you're going to stay there for their entire career? Almost no one in this room would say yes to that. I mean, they would like to, but it won't happen. Why? Because they can't guarantee you job security. They can't. No company, any company that says they can guarantee you job security is nuts. Talk to the folks from Tesla that just got 300 exit things last week. So you're joining Tesla. Oh, this is a great company. I can do this forever. Nope, doesn't do it. Doesn't do it. So job security is out the window. Unfortunately for me, this all happened when I first got my first executive job. And my first day, this is the truth, my first day in leading what was the 6th largest technology organization in the world, I was told by the president of that division, "Fran, you have to downsize your organization by 40 to 50%. Day one. My first day. And so I had my meeting with my staff, and I said to them this: "You're the 6th largest technology organization in the US. My job is to make you the 12th largest technology organization in the world." And I had to face people one by one by one, and I had to break that social contract with them. And at that point in time in my career, I had 35 years left of senior executive management, and what could I do? And so in the next 35 years, I tried to figure out how to retain people when I couldn't offer them job security. How do I get people who are in technology highly marketable? And in writing this book, I kind of summarize the 4 techniques that really worked for me in helping to retain people and have a view of their mind share while they're working with them. The first one Michael talked about. It was the way to have people be engaged with you while they're there for 3 years is to actually increase their marketability, which seems like it's counterintuitive. Why would you make somebody more marketable? But as Michael said earlier, as long as you are giving them marketable skills, what are you doing? You're giving them life security, not job security. And as long as you're giving someone life security, they will stay with you. And for you who are in the workforce or entering into the workforce, what you want to do is take jobs that increase your life security, that give you the skills and techniques that make you more marketable, that allow you to be leveraged across multiple different industries and multiple different jobs. So number 1, increasing their marketability. 2, if you are leading an organization or you are joining an organization, you want to be part of the first team of the organization. You want to be part of the strategy of the organization. You don't really want to be in the back office, the support thing. You want to be out there in front, because when downsizing eventually happens, who are the people who get eliminated? The support people, not the people who are strategic. And so if you are leading an organization, your job as a leader is to make your organization strategic, meaning you are a critical component of their success. And if you're joining an organization and you're not part of that, don't join. Or just join for a little bit, learn some stuff, and then leave. Because it won't, you'll be the first to be eliminated. The next is, as a leader, and as also when you are joining organizations, you want to join organizations that have a set of shared values, that people have the same type of value set that you have. And people will work for organizations that have that set of shared values. And that will get people to be really linked into you. And the last one, we'll talk about business life goals. Because the ultimate in both where you're working or where you're leading is if you can touch someone's life goals, if while they're with you, they are learning something which has meaning to their ultimate goal of work at the end of their business career, and they're having to obtain that from you at this point in time, then they'll stay, which is part of the reason why you're all getting the education you're getting, because it's part of your life goal. So what I like to do is just kind of reflect back. All of those 4 principles haven't come into play on every place that I have gone and every place that I have had the opportunity to lead. Some work and some don't. For example, in Wall Street, increasing marketability was the ultimate way of retaining people to work for you at Wall Street. Because people who wanted to leave your organization at Wall Street walked across the street and interviewed at another place. It wasn't a big deal to move from one job to the other. So if you're not increasing their marketability, they are gone in the afternoon. So the ultimate thing on Wall Street is increasing their marketability. As Michael talked about, we happen to have the opportunity at a little company called Solomon Brothers to actually increase the marketability of everyone who's there. And at the same time, those techniques were really strategic to the company. And we made it strategic because we created a separate technology company, so everybody there was a part of the technology company. Now on Wall Street, shared values are interesting. My first, I thought I was going to do shared values at Wall Street. And so I had my first meeting, and there was about 1,000 people in an auditorium, and I put all the values up: communications, collaboration, all the other types of stuff. And I got this from the back of the room. They said, "We don't see money on that chart." And I said, "Well, money's not a value." And they laughed. They laughed. I was like, why are you laughing? And they said, this is Wall Street. Money's our only value. This is the reason why we're here. And so we couldn't use shared values the way I wanted to use them, but we could use money to have them behave as if they adopted those shared values. So I cut everybody's bonus by 70% in the first year. And I said, I want you to collaborate, communicate, be part of organizations. And if you do that, you'll get your money back at the end of the next year. And they were screaming and yelling, you're paying us off. How could you do this? And I said, money is your value. And so we'll use that. So if you can't use values the way you need to, you could still get people to behave as if they're believing those values. This one, I was a transitional leader. When you're a transitional leader, I happened to be a transitional head of technology for 2 years at Citibank and at NASDAQ for 2 years and at Bankers Trust for a year. And in each of those cases, the people didn't work for me. And so the other 3 things that I talked about, I really couldn't use there. But I did learn something that was really, really interesting. And that was the whole concept of that I mentioned earlier, which is the business life plan. A business life plan, as I detailed in my second book, is if I were to ask you today to write a paragraph as if you were being recorded on the last day of your business life. And don't tell me the job, just tell me the activities. And those activities had to make the next 40 years of your life all worthwhile, what you're doing that day. It's hard for you to do that in your 20s. In your 30s, it's a lot easier to do because it has a little bit more meaning. But if you were to write that down, we would unearth a job that allowed you to do that. And then we would unearth people who had those jobs. And then we would look at their skills and knowledge. And we would chart that back to today. And that would become your business life plan. And if you had to intersect in those 3-year periods of time what you were actually learning how to do, that would be your business life plan. And that helped a lot. And in those places, the business life plan enabled people to participate and stay focused because they were getting these business life skills. As Michael mentioned, where things really work, and if you ever get the responsibility, the opportunity to implement all 4 of these retention types of techniques, you will find amazing results. We took an organization that was rated 440 in the top 500 organizations in the United States, and within a 3-year period of time, they were number 10 in all of the organizations in the world. They received a whole bunch of accolades. These people were really good people to start off with, but they never had really had this worked out for them. And we worked this out for everybody. And everybody in the organizations had a formal mentoring process. And everybody in the organization had a business life plan. And everybody in the organization knew what their 3-year period of time was in doing what they needed to do for their business life plan. The end result of that was this. All of the awards that you talked about and all of the different things that Mike mentioned earlier happened because of that. And that we created probably one of the world's best technology organizations from an organization that was thought of as just an afterthought in one place. So before I leave, I wanted to just give you one, if you take anything away from this, understand that as you become a leader of organizations, you are touching people's lives. You are really touching people's lives. Even if you're a first-level leader, you're touching people's lives. And what you do is very important to them. It is amazing for me to hear, like Mike or Jeff Nicholson just a couple of minutes ago, saying that their time with me has touched their life. And so focus on that. Please just keep that more than anything else. Focus on working with people on their business life plan. Focus on what you can do to enrich their lives. Focus on what you can do for them while the time that they are with you, and they will do a lot for you. And just don't get distracted. My last story for you is about my cousin, Bill Johnson, who is a sheriff for my Ashtabula, Ohio county where I was born. And Bill is an example of focus. There's this bar in Ashtabula that a lot of people go to and unfortunately get very drunk. And he, as the sheriff, wanted to make an example of somebody who comes out of the bar. He was going to make an example of the next time a drunk comes out of there, I'm going to get them. I'm going to make an example of everybody. So he parked his vehicle 2 blocks down on a side street so you couldn't see it. And he snuck up and he was looking. And sure enough, 3 hours later, a guy comes out of the bar and he is like obviously drunk. He almost falls down the stairs. He drops his keys. He goes into the car. He tries to put the keys in the car and he misses it, hits the window. But it took him 5 minutes to get in the car. He gets in the car. Lights go on, lights go off, lights go on, lights go off. Finally finds the key, starts the car, backs it up like most drunk people do at 2 miles an hour, starts going down the street at 2 miles an hour, and as luck would have it, turns down the same side street that my cousin Bill is on. Bill gets into his car, goes out there, stops the car, pulls the guy out. And the guy gets out and he gives him the sobriety test. He's sober. He goes, wait a minute. And he has him walk. He goes, wait a minute. Aren't you the drunk that came out of there? He goes, no, I'm the decoy. And so don't get distracted by other things when you're doing your job. Touch people's lives. And don't get distracted by decoys like quarterly earnings and those type of stuff. Just touch their lives. Thank you. The question was, how do you keep focus? What some of the things that distractions that I've had in my career, and you'll have these distractions. You'll be leading an organization in the market for reasons unknown to you and really that you're not a part of will start to turn down, and suddenly you'll get things like corporate edicts to, well, we want you to reduce your expenses. And you have a plan, like for example, I'll give you a perfect example. At Bell South, we had a meeting of all of the managers who managed people. I had about 10,000 people working for me. About 300 people were second and third level managers of organizations. And we'd have a meeting once a month. And the edict came down, we're having problems. You can't have, we used to have coffee in Danish at the meetings. And the edict came down. He said, we cannot have you meet with 250 people and us supply coffee in Danish. And we said, well, we got to still do this. So we had our value set, and each of the meetings were sponsored by a value. So I asked the group, what do you think? And they said, well, here's what we're going to do. We want to have coffee in Danish. So we're going to have a bake sale ourselves. Each group is going to bring in food. This is a minor thing, but we're going to bring in food and coffee. And at the end of the year, we'll donate what we've done to charity. At the end of that year, we took a bad thing, which people were grumbling about. How could they not pay coffee? We donated $10,000 to charity based on that. So you could get distracted and go off on a path, or you can use that as an opportunity to focus on your value set. Well, I mean, we are rapidly moving to a digital society. So the intersection between business process and digital enhancement is where everybody is going to. And within that kind of umbrella, there are a bunch of different things. Things from edge computing to virtual reality to AI are all things that are technical things. But on the human side, I was just talking to Jeff about a paper that you're looking at, which is what is the implications to the future of jobs based on what's happening now in industry. And we talked about like Uber. Uber is enabling people who would have not been able to be mobile to get around, like 80-year-old people. But we haven't thought about what do they do when is there something to do when they get around? Is there some things that we can now offer to people who were not mobile? They are able to be mobile now that was never thought of. I've invested in a bunch of restaurants, for example. And the people who are running those restaurants are finding that their alcohol consumption has gone up in all their restaurants because of Uber, which I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing, but for their profit, it's a good thing. But they haven't thought through how do you deal with that in terms of new business processes, new types of things, so they more emphasize that. So there's a whole element of society that has what I call it is, you want to try to have unintended consequences be intended consequences. You have this enabling thing that's happening in society with becoming a digital society, and there are implications on job structure, on retail, on a whole bunch of other types of things. Any place that you can touch, and I call those vectors, any place you can touch in a vector is like riding a wave. You could do that. Interesting. The question was, what was my resume experience? I've been in technology for about 35 years. I graduated from Rutgers with a history degree. I got into technology by accident. I interviewed at AT&T, and in my interview question, since I was an arrogant person, I said, how do I get to be chairman of the board the fastest way? And they said, we have this new thing called programming, and we're training people on how to be programmers. And if you do it, and if you do it very well, you can skip over a bunch of management levels. And I said, sign me up. I didn't realize at the time that the training program was so rigid that if we got less than an 80% in any one of our weekly tests, we lost our job. So I had I know you have pressure on your exams and that type of stuff, but I was married and had just about ready to have a child, and I became very good at technology because the threat of losing my job was right there. And I dove into it like I've never dove into anything and really caught fire on it, got very deep into technology, went really into infrastructure, machine, all bunch of different types of stuff. So I think I can't tell you what educational background will help you. I can just tell you that for me, as a double major, history and education, for me, I became a leader who was a teacher. And that's always what I wanted to do. That may not work for everybody, but as you can tell, I'm verbal. And so that was an important part of my leadership technique, and so those skills were good for me at the time. Okay, the question was, how do you make somebody strategic? There are a couple of ways of making someone strategic, and also a couple of ways of assessing whether you're in the strategic part of something, okay? The first thing is the company, say you're a technologist, is the product that you are working on the product of the company? So if you're a technologist and you're working at Microsoft or Google, the product of the company is what you're working on. That's first thing. The second thing is the function that you're working in a part of the transformation of the company? If I was working for Ford Motor Company right now, I'd be working on the driverless car project. That's strategic. So looking at the project that is actually transformational to the company that you're working. So either the product or the project that you can assess. If you're the leader, it's the third thing you can do is you could create for any one particular function, you could create a company whose product is that function. And even if you're head of human resources, you can create a human resources company if the CEO of the company will allow you to do it, and do human resources for that company and other companies at the same time. And so therefore, the people who are working there are part of the product of the company. That's essentially what we did at Salomon Brothers. Now, after 2 years of having a separate company, the chairman of Salomon Brothers said, you can do this, but you can only sell to us for 2 years, which we did. After 2 years, we were so successful, he told me I couldn't offer it to anybody else. So, sometimes you lose. Anything else?
Okay, why don't we give him one last round of applause?
Thank you.